Welcome to this look at the LevelUp 737 for X-Plane. After flying the 20-year-old PMDG recently, I thought I would see how the latest modern add-ons compare. This plane's systems are based on the Zibo 737, which I always found to be a bit unreliable, but we won't find out until we fly it. We'll run through the cold and dark start, which is like any other 737. If you're not here for the tutorial, just skip ahead to the flight section to see how this plane performs. So batteries and standby power are on. We'll call up the ground power cart on the EFB. The ground power cart reminds me of one of those delivery robots, the ones that I like to film doing stupid things and upload to my other channel. And on that note, if you like computers doing stupid things, you will love the approach section of this video. So with the cart connected, we switched on ground power and window heat. Trim air goes on, we check the packs are off. In-flight entertainment is on. We'll switch the IRS to nav and wait for it to align, which won't take long because I've set it to short in the EFB. Heading down to the FMC, we'll go to the position page, we will enter our departure airport and copy our location across into the scratch pad so the IRS knows where it is to start alignment. Head over to the route page, enter our origin and destination airports, doing Stansted to Glasgow here, it's a nice test route, into the route page and start entering our waypoints. I'll just do one here to demo and then we'll skip ahead. With waypoints entered, we'll pick our departure runway and a SID. So we're going from the active runway, which is runway 04, and a list of the SIDs available for that runway are on the left hand side. We'll pick the one at the top just for convenience. You'll obviously get yours from your flight planner, SimBrief, whatever. Activate, execute the changes and pick our arrival. We'll go for the ILS on 05 and we'll pick a start and a transition. Flicking through the legs page, we'll just clear out any gaps in our flight plan and we've now got a good contiguous plan from A to B. We'll head over to the perf page and we'll need a few numbers here from the EFB, so we'll go to the payload page on there. So next to weight on the EFB, you'll see your gross weight, so enter that into the gross weight section of your perf page. Reserves, I entered a 0 for the demo, enter whatever your flight plan says, same with cost index, I just put it at 100. Enter the cruising flight level, so 290 or 29,000 feet today. Press execute, flick through to the takeoff page. For this flight we're going flaps 5, and then we'll just click the V-speed soft keys to commit our V-speeds. On the radio panel, set nav1 and nav2 to the ILS at your destination. Head back up to the overhead panel, turn on the leftmost fuel pump, and hold down the APU starter switch for 3 seconds until you see the needle on the gauge above start to move. Once the APU is available, signified by the blue light above the APU generator switch lighting, switch on the APU gen and the APU bleed. You can now switch off the ground power and disconnect the ground cart on the EFB. Now turn on the remaining fuel pumps and turn on hydraulic pumps to the top right. For convenience, I set the engine start switch to both. I turn engine 1 to ground and introduce fuel. In the real world, I think they do engine 2 then engine 1 and also wait before the N2 reaches a certain percentage before introducing fuel, but this is a sim and it doesn't seem fussy, so you can just do it all instantly. When you have a good start, the engine switch returns to the center position. You can then repeat the process with the other engine. As soon as both engines are started, turn on the engine gens, switch off the APU bleed, check the engine bleeds are on, set the packs to auto, and switch off the APU. Last few bits on the overhead panel are yaw damper to on, emergency exit lights, and whichever aircraft lights are appropriate to the stage of flight you're at. We're just doing a demo from the runway, but you might be at the gate or taxiing. Heading over to the MCP, flight directors on. Setting the course to the course of our destination runway. Remember to set barometric pressure to match the local weather conditions. Because we're on the runway and about to depart, we'll set TA-RA on the transponder panel. If you can work around the traditionally bad X-Plane click spots, set some radio minimums as well. And also at this stage configure the ND to your liking. You can also clear out that master caution. Final steps on the overhead panel, make sure your cruising altitude is entered into the aircon pressurization panel. Probe heat on, anti-ice as required. Check your V2 speed on the FMS and set your MCP speed to that. Set auto brake to RTO for takeoff. Enter your cruising altitude as the MCP altitude, and VNAV will obey restrictions on the way up to that. Switch on LNAV and VNAV and set flaps for takeoff. Arm the auto throttle. With that, we're good to go. Turn the parking brake off and apply throttle. You'll hear callouts for 80 knots V1 and rotate, and as soon as you hear positive rate you can also bring up the landing gear. So despite this SID being valid for this runway, it actually faces the other direction, so we're going to manually follow the FD until we've turned around, then we'll switch on the autopilot to follow the SID on our departure. As we climb and pass flap speeds on the PFD speed tape, we can set the flaps to 1 and then 0. Some bits and pieces we can get checked off while we're climbing. Auto brake to max, make sure spoilers are armed, and you can also do your approach ref at this stage if you want. So that's on init ref, approach, and pick your desired approach speed and flap setting. As we're in flight now, we can start to take a look at how the plane performs. So it has no problem following VNAV altitude constraints that are set in your flight plan. What it's not so great at is what to do after those constraints. So as it climbs, it will happily bust through the 250 knot speed limit. It will eventually adjust itself back, but it does get a little bit wild initially. And of course, don't forget to set your altimeter to standard pressure as you pass through transition altitude. Looking at the EFB, I think it needs a little more thought put into user experience. So there's a quick save button, great, but then how do I load that? Apparently you have to go into manage aircraft presets, but then I still couldn't find a way to load the quick save. All I could find is a way to save and load numbered configs. It's just small things like that that could probably benefit from being looked over by a professional eye, but it's still frustrating to the user. Back to the flight, the plane has no issues levelling off at top of climb and settling into a cruise. As we reach the halfway point of our flight, thoughts so far, it is improved compared to the old Zibo product, but it's still not quite as good as a 20-year-old PMDG for flights in 2004. It's not so much an issue with the fact that this is a free product either, because the fly-by-wire A32NX for flights in 2020 is also freeware, but there just seems to be more attention paid to quality and reliability in that product. I think that extra layer of professional sheen is something that Zibo and friends have always struggled with, and this latest product is no different. Continuing with the flight, at the top of climb, we have set our MCP altitude to the lowest altitude we will hit on our descent, which is about 2,400 feet. After that, we'll be on the glide slope for the airport. At top of descent, the plane behaves correctly. It idles the throttle and begins pitching down following its descent path. To give this product credit when comparing it to older professional products, this plane doesn't seem to be as slippery as the PMDGs. You don't have to use any spoilers on the way down. Whether that's the plane itself or the better flight dynamics of X-Plane, I'm not too sure, but credit where it is due. At 10,000 feet it does decelerate to 250 knots, but again it's a little bit weird where it's constantly finding itself below the target speed and having to kind of catch itself back up. You can see here it's about 8 or 9 knots below where it actually should be, and there's a big throttle application to deal with that. The main deceleration phase for approach happens correctly with the plane slowing down in VNAV mode, and it gets slower as you increment the flaps until you reach approach speed exactly as it should. So as we make our turn onto final, we'll activate the localizer, and then as soon as we're established we'll hit approach. It's at this point in good old-fashioned Zibo style the plane decides it would rather be somewhere else, and we begin some weird 90-degree turn. I thought it was going to be a 180-degree turn, but then suddenly the plane decides it does want to go to the airport after all, and banks hard left, aiming us back towards the localizer. Weirdly enough, we are still on the correct VNAV path during this little detour, but initially we blew way past the localizer, and it does feel like we're a little bit low as we approach the glide slope. It does eventually straighten up and fly right, and at that point I think maybe this is going to happen after all, so drop the landing gear and also activate AP2 in the hope we can demonstrate some kind of Autoland here. As we intercept the glide slope, the plane does correctly pick it up and descends without any drama. Passing through 1400, we also get the correct land-3 enunciators. Autoland has traditionally been something that Zibo has been good at, so I'm not expecting too much trouble here, and it even deals with a speed correction while on the glide slope just to get it to our actual approach speed. As expected, the plane makes a good autoland, get the correct flare and rollout enunciators. It's a fairly smooth touchdown, although I think maybe it slams the nose down a little bit hard. We put the reversers on and the auto brakes apply correctly, and rolling to a stop brings an end to this successful flight in the LevelUp 737. As we look at the replay here, you can see it flares quite nicely and brings us down for a buttery smooth landing, which is impressive. There were good weather conditions, but still, it does get the nose down a little bit hard, but ultimately a very good auto land. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this useful or at least entertaining. If you did, please drop a like and feel free to subscribe, as I make this kind of content fairly regularly. Take care, and I'll see you next time.